What's up, guys? Shine YGO here. YCS Birmingham is about 2 or 3 weeks away, and I'm gonna be going. So I wanted to make a video on the decks that you guys should consider taking to the event. With the introduction of Supreme Darkness, we're going to see decks that were already pretty strong get major buffs. In particular, the best deck currently is Fiendsmith Ryzeal, and as of the new set, we're going to be getting Eclipse Twins. This card is really good for the Ryzeal strategy because it essentially allows you to loop Detonator by letting you summon back out an Xyz monster and attach another Xyz monster under it as material whenever the card is sent to the graveyard. Which means what they're going to do is use X Ryzeal, send the Eclipse Twins, and then attach it with Detonator to then later on, once they've basically used up all their pops, they can use Detonator to pop itself and then resummon it with Eclipse Twins. That's just one of the applications of the card, and it's really crazy. It boosts Ryzeal Fiendsmith to new heights, and other Ryzeal variants as well. It's very clearly the strongest deck, and so these decks are keeping that in mind and have at least a decent matchup or have a strong amount of counterplay to this strategy. My first pick is going to be Yubel. More specifically, Fiendsmith Yubel, but you will probably know what I'm talking about. This deck has sustained like a very decent nerf with Phantom of Yubel going to 1 and that being their strongest card. It can no longer act as the extender and end board piece that it once was. However, Yubel still has some strong points for it being a mainstay in the format. It can still make a really oppressive board going first that not even really Fiendsmith Ryzeal is able to crack. And because of the floating effects of the Yubel monsters themselves, it means that Detonator's, target to pop a card effect isn't really as oppressive against this strategy in particular. Furthermore, the common hand traps you'll see people playing of like Ash, Veiler to stop Ryzeal often are going to be completely eaten by Yubel because you need to be able to probably hand trap the deck to death to even have a chance of stopping them from making the full board. The deck is very well positioned going into YCS Birmingham, and I would not be surprised to see this deck with maybe a couple of tops in top 32, top 16, maybe even one slot in top 8. So definitely a deck I think people can play and can do really well with, especially with a very good pilot. My second pick going into YCS Birmingham is Tempai Dragon, which you can call it here now as my prediction. I think is most likely going to be either the second most represented deck or the first. Whenever we come to like UK sorts of events, Tempai tends to always be the most popular. So this might be some personal bias here, but for this event, I think it's a very good pick. The deck, even though it's received some nerfs to both Sangan Kaiman and Tempai Dragon Chandra, making the deck less consistent, they didn't nerf the kill combo itself. You can still do an insane amount, like 30,000 damage in one Tempai Dragon combo, right? And because the engine is a lot smaller, it's got the added benefit of now you being able to run lots more non-engine with it, or additionally, you can play other variants like the Tempai Fiendsmith Striker version, where now Tempai is simply a small engine you play as sort of an OTK package along with your other engines. In addition, Tempai can beat Detonator a lot easier because of how the damage step works, where Detonator can't activate to target during the damage step, and what's more, whenever it targets a Tempai, the Tempais can just easily quick synchro out in the battle phase anyway. And most of the time, your opponent probably will be ending on Detonator Pass into your Tempai deck because you've probably, hand trapped them with the 20 plus hand traps in your deck. So you've been able to hand trap them at least twice, maybe drop one or two Mold Charmies drawn into your engine. And so from there, you can see how Tempai is a very strong deck, especially in a Ryzeal dominated format. It's well positioned, and a lot of the hand traps people are going to be playing won't really affect the deck too much anyway. Like, Ghost Belt is becoming a lot more popular, and that is not going to really deal with Tempai that much. So yeah, I think Tempai is my second pick for a really good choice for YCS Birmingham. My third pick for YCS Birmingham will be Memento. And this includes both the Memento Pure version and the Memento Fiendsmith version. I'm learning the deck myself, really. It's such a good deck going into this format. The only real issues this deck has is that it's hard. And any skilled piler will be able to take this deck to the top. It has numerous good qualities. Number one is, when it comes to the Ryzeal matchup, this deck actually does quite well, because a lot of this deck is actually based on destroying your own cards to turn on your effects. So Detonator's effect to pop cards doesn't actually do as much in this matchup. Okay. This is further emphasized by the two quick play dodge cards that they have, that being Memento Bone Party and Goblin Bikers Gone Wild, being able to either destroy in the case of Bone Party or tribute in the case of Goblin Bikers. Grand Breakout, not Goblin Party. I don't know why I said that, but anyway. Yeah, with them being able to dodge stuff like Detonators, target effect apart, infinite impermanence is the most prominent thing that you tend to be dodging with this card, and you're able to basically put more bodies on the board. This deck actually makes a pretty solid end board, with it being IP, with Creation King, along with the trap that either you're using the Appaloosa sort of trap that can negate monster effects on field, or you're using the Destruction trap, which is basically like an Icarus attack. Now, with that being said, we can talk about Creation King. This card is a custom card. It's great, honestly. It is like is the best card in the archetype by far. Being able to send 3 Memento cards from extra deck or deck to graveyard is a godsend for this archetype. It is so good. And lots more. It also has that effect where you can target Memento monsters on board and your opponent's cards and destroy them, which that destruction can then be used to trigger other effects in your Memento deck. It's a very good card. A very, very strong card, and I think this deck has a very good shot at topping, and it is probably going to be the deck I choose to pick for YCS. Probably, if I can source all the cards, because god damn it, all the listings on eBay are American. It's hell. But anyway, yeah, this deck is very strong. If you think that you can commit the time and effort necessary, you should pick up this deck. The only real weaknesses that this deck has is, of course, difficulty, and it is kind of hidden the crossfire by the non-engine people are gonna be playing. That key offender is Artifact Lancia. Lancia being a very prominent card in the YCS Birmingham format is a bit of a downer, but overall, this deck is really good. It has lines through Lancia anyway, so it's not the biggest deal, but this deck is really good. So yeah, Memento, very good pick. I've gone on for it for too long. The next deck I'm going to recommend is the Mitsurugi deck. It's a new deck to Supreme Darkness, so you'll get that added benefit of it being brand new, and not everyone's going to know what the deck does. And it is very strong, especially for a TCG exclusive. Now, the best variant, and the one I'm recommending, is the Ryzeal variant. King of the Feral Imps, and being able to loop it with Twins of the Eclipse. just make the deck so much more consistent. And the ritual spell is kind of broken. Being able to summon a ritual out of your deck, or when you have the ritual in hand, which you most likely will off of the King of the Pharolymphs, being able to ritual summon using materials in your deck, like some sort of branded fusion, like copy. It's a absolutely great card. And the Mitsurugi Negate, this card is really good, right? It's not just a blanket on the negate. Instead, it gives you the option of your opponent to discard a card. This at first may not seem like the best because, your opponent can still get their effects off, but they're having to trade one card out of their hand to do it. And this has to be on both their turn and for your turn as well. So even though they may be resolving their effects, they're slowly but surely burning resources out of their hand each turn. And card advantage is really important in Yu-Gi-Oh! And when you have a card that pretty much guarantees that your opponent has to go -1 each turn, that's really good. So I think Mitsurugi Ryzeal is going to be a really strong deck going into YCS Birmingham. And Mitsurugi Reptile has some merit, where you get that whole reptile synergy, Snake Rain with like Ogdodic and stuff, right? So it's still good, but Mitsurugi Ryzeal is obviously like far and away way better. But yeah, I think that Mitsurugi, more specifically Mitsurugi Ryzeal, for its ability to break the boards of the Ryzeal like Fiendsmith deck. Like if you've seen DB replays of people like Triff Gaming, you'll see how he's able to just break the Ryzeal Fiendsmith board apart using this Mitsurugi deck. It's got a very, very good repertoire to deal with the mirror. Overall, I think this deck is another really good pick for the YCS. It does decently into Ryzeal, partly because, of course, you're playing Ryzeal cards in the deck, and so, if you can't beat them, join them. But the Mitsurugi cards add another layer, another new ceiling for the deck. And that's pretty cool. Someone has to add spice into Ryzeal somehow. So yeah, Mitsurugi Ryzeal, good pick. An honorable mention is the pure Fiendsmith deck. So the Kashtira Fiendsmith deck, as well as the Musketeer Fiendsmith deck. These decks are pretty good, but going into the Supreme Darkness format, where every deck pretty much has a higher ceiling, as well as a lot of the top meta decks using the Fiendsmith engine themselves now, and especially because now Fiendsmith in Paradise is a card that's pretty common in these Fiendsmith builds now. All of the benefits of playing a pure Fiendsmith deck are kind of outshone by the fact that instead of that, you can basically have the entire grind game of Fiendsmith. Just now you have another engine that helps out your deck massively. Why would you play just Fiendsmith cards when you could also play Ryzeal cards along with it, or Maliss cards, right? So pure Fiendsmith, I think it's pretty good. There might be maybe one or two in terms of top 32 when it comes to YCS Birmingham, but I don't have really as much faith. Same goes with like the Bestial Control Fiendsmith sort of decks. These decks were pretty good going into like last format, but because the ceiling is so much higher now, I don't think that they're going to do as well. Not necessarily an honorable mention, but I wanted to take this time to talk about basically how I think that the event is going to go. I think that the most poorly positioned deck going into this format is Maliss. The non-engine people are using just hits Maliss in the crossfire, and in the case of the big blowout, Artifact Lancia just completely destroys it. And Artifact Lancia is a side deck staple. Everyone at the event is going to be running it. Not to mention the brand new Mulcharmy Meows, as it's called now. Nialis was a much better name, not gonna lie, but being able to basically get a draw for each time your opponent summons from the banished or the graveyard, this card hurts Maliss massively, and I think the card is going to see some play. Mulcharmy Perulia is falling out of favor, and as such, we need the brand new Mulcharmy to fill the gap where Perulia is probably going to leave. Obviously, Fualos is also really strong, but playing 6 Mulcharmies in your side deck is something that is still really good. So I think that it's going to see at least some play. Which leaves Maliss in a tough spot. Not to mention, the best non-engine for this format is stuff like Thrust, which can get you into Artifact Sanctum. You've got, obviously, the Mulcharmy, Fualos, and the Meows, but you've also got Dominus Impulse starting to creep back in the format, as well as Ghost Bell. And these two cards also hit Maliss, so I think that it's poorly positioned going into this format as such. This is not to say that I don't think it will see a lot of play, because it will. It's going to see a lot of representation going into the new format. And so the decks you want to play, you might want to be slightly cautious of Dimension Shifter, because since the Fiendsmith engine is going to be so popular at this event, Dimension Shifter becomes really good again and a massive problem. So maybe picking decks that can work into Dimension Shifter also work as well. Some of the decks on this list can work into Shifter, but really, this entire format hasn't really been acclimatized, I would say, to Shifter, because it's been out of the format so long, right? Because Ryzeal doesn't lose to Shifter, and as such, you tended not to want to put Shifter in your lists. But now Shifter is probably going to come back now. I think the format is going to be full of hand traps that hurt Maliss quite a bit, so even though I think it's going to see good representation, because it's still the second best deck in the game, I just don't think it's going to be able to do as well at this event specifically. Yeah. And that's that. I hope you all enjoyed this video on the decks that I think you should take to YCS Birmingham. I didn't really want to include like the obvious, pick Ryzeal Fiendsmith or else you're going to go X3 sort of route. For all of you going to YCS Birmingham, good luck. And for those going to YCS Orlando who are still watching this video, I'm going to be putting out a video for YCS Orlando as well. But most of the stuff that I say in here can also be applied to it as well. So with that, Sean YGO out.